God, that feels good. All right, for the last 3 days, I've been staying up late at night. I've been thinking, what can I do to build the final production version of this thing? And there was something very liberating about building this because I wasn't building it for sale. This was my project. I had complete liberty over everything involved. And now that I'm thinking about building one of these and making like 5 of them and selling them, all of a sudden there's this whole like impostership syndrome. Who am I to build Highbankers? Like, what are people going to think about this decision or that decision? And I couldn't pull the trigger. So in my mind, I said, you know what? I'm just going to build the next version of this. If I kept doing this for 10 years, it would probably continue to look different with every iteration. It's called iterative design. It's how you kind of step products forwards. 10 years from now, if I'm still producing something that looks exactly like what I'm about to build, well, it's because I've stopped doing that research and development. So with that frame set in mind, I sat down this afternoon. I spent several hours drafting everything out, getting my measurements, measuring this, measuring what's on my graph paper there, and trying to come up with what I think is the perfect next iteration of this with the changes in mind that I have. Right here is not very much, but that right there is the first cut. You can see some sketches on this piece of paper here. This guy here happens to go around a corner that is, that little corner radius and that corner radius are exactly the radius of a gold pan. How convenient. And I gotta say, it feels good to have taken that first step. So from this point forwards, hopefully I get some sort of a sluice box by the end of the week, and that'll be something that I can actually use on this next adventure. Rather than just tapering from the wide end of the sluice to the narrow end of the sluice in one straight line, I only really need it tall at this end for the water flow to go into the top box and everything properly. So I'm saving just a little bit of weight by doing it this way. I could obviously just drop this straight down and over, but this allows me to run with the shears better, and I think it looks better. And you know, it's just a little bit lighter doing it this way. And then because I'm not flaring the sluice this time, I'm actually making the sides, instead of coming up to a straight 90 degrees, they're going to be leaned out slightly. And what that's going to do is I'm leaning them out at a very precise angle so that when the second box sits inside the first box, it's still the exact same width. So as this comes out, then the top box will be the same width. So the top mat and the bottom mat will both be exactly the same width. And also, because it widens as it goes up, as you pull one layer out of the other, it'll allow it to kind of loosen and pull free a little bit easier. Then at the top section, it's going to go out like that, and then for the very top section here, it's actually going to bend in, so it'll be 90. So it'll sort of come out and then go up at a 90, and that's what I've drawn here. Is it's going to come out on this pre-cut line to this point, and then I'm actually just going to cut this right here, so it'll be straight vertical at the top, and that vertical will work for your hinge points for where the rest of the Highbanker goes on top. So I don't know if you can visualize how this is going to look sort of like this, but yeah, I'll bend that up and let's see how it goes. Starting to get my new brake dialed in there, and I managed to bend up and get welded together this piece here, as I showed you earlier, and now this is the insert. And the real trick here is I decided to use a 0.050, so 50 thousandths of an inch instead of 64 thousandths of an inch, because it's, you know, plenty strong enough. It's not like it's got legs riveted to it or any pivot points on it. But welding this stuff, I kind of knew, like, the thinner aluminum is, the harder it is to weld. And it's acceptable, like obviously it's a functional structural weld, but especially on this side, she ain't pretty starting out. And I'm doing the splitter, instead of having it in the hopper this time, the splitter is going to happen in the insert itself. And so gold fingers will lose its fingers, but we're gonna see how this works out. Weld this up, and then I'll show you that slotting in to that. In this box, I put the splitter in the hopper itself, hence gold fingers. And I'm still kind of torn about the best way to do that, because in this box, I put the splitter in this insert. And if I can clean up my welding and get my tolerances really dialed in, I think this can look good. But when you pull this out, it's sort of got this chunky thing at the front. Whereas this setup, it gives me a little more liberty because I just have to make sure that all of my water hits this little plane right here. I've just left the insert a little bit long in order to build out the two little pieces that split the flow up there, but obviously everything will be flush at the end here. And my dimensions, specifically right now, 39 inches, because I can find a box for shipping that is 40 inches long. And if you go to the next size up a box, it increases the cost of shipping. For example, to Europe, it goes up by 100 Canadian dollars. So I figured the old box is 36 inches long. This one's already 3 inches longer. So I might as well just take full advantage of what I'm able to ship in the most efficient way. For the curved screen on the old box, I kind of drew in the curve. I guess you can't really see the curve, but averaging out the top of the curve here, I could see this angle versus that angle, and you can see how much different they are. I think it's something like 20 degrees versus 40 or 45 degrees by the time it gets to the very bottom third. So this is my old screen that still has a curve to it, and even with a flat guide bar for the screen, you can still keep a curved screen, and it actually has a bit of spring to it, which might be beneficial. So that's always still an option, but cutting this with a curve involved a jigsaw and a lot of time. So on this model, my screen guide, the difference in angle between the initial part of the screen and the tail end of the screen, this is about a 4 degrees difference. And according to what I was running out in the field, I've got my screen angle of 23 degrees and 26 degrees, both seemed pretty optimal. So I'm going to set it so that this section at the top here is going to go into the box roughly like so, and I'll cut off the excess here, but right up here with my fingers, this will be set at a 23 degree angle, and then down here, this section here will be at around 26 to 27 degrees. And if we need any additional curve to the screen, you can actually just bend up the screen, and then this will just sort of sit up above and not be supported and be able to sort of flex a little bit. But yeah, that is the plan. It allows me to use a circular saw to cut this, which is quicker, and I think get a more useful, like more of the screen's angle will be at a useful angle. This is also a 1/4 inch bar instead of 3/16, just to give us a little bit better bite on the screen. And so one of the things that I might run into is water dribbling down along the top of this. So I will need to cut a relief cut, probably right at the corner point here, or maybe just down from it, where I basically just cut out a little piece here so that any water that's dribbling down here gets tossed into the box. At this stage in the process, I've got 3 holes here, and I don't believe these will be on the production model. This is just to give one final test idea out in the field. But essentially, the angle of this start of the screen here is going to be a target of 24 degrees. And so if I want this to be at 14 degrees, that's a 10 degree offset. And if I want it to be a little bit steeper, then you've got your 5 degree offset. And if you want it to be a little bit flatter, you've got your 15 degree offset. So I'm going to be setting this up for the field test at 10 degrees, which is what I got during my testing with this guy right here. So we're going to be running a target 14 degrees hopper, 24 degrees screen, tilting into about a 27 degree screen at the bottom. I'll go into more details about the decisions I made in this build progression here in a future video. However, for now, I would just like to point out that I have increased the screen area by about 60%. And in the screen itself, if we zoom in here, you'll see that here, I've actually removed every second bar going across for better water penetration. That was not necessary by any means. However, I made some efforts so that this could actually handle the water flow of up to a 3-inch dredge. Because I know there's some guys in the United States of America who are interested in running a 3-inch dredge over a 20-inch wide sluice box with classified material. So this can handle that amount of water flow, but for here in Alberta, I'm focusing on this being just the ultimate high banker. And the one thing I really want to focus on right now before I go out to the river and I explain the rest is that hole right there. I used to go through the bottom here, and I had a bolt, and that's what held this top in. Now everything else is just little snap clips down there. This has a unique way of sort of sliding up and locking into place. So here's your option for bolts. You got to have some wrenches, and you got to have a bolt and a nut. You can get rid of one of those wrenches if you go to a wing nut and a bolt, or a wing bolt apparently, and a nut. Or you can just go all out and, you know, have sort of one of these little things right here. And so I was basically going to use this, and I would be happy to purchase a Highbanker from anyone, providing they're using some sort of wing bolts or wing nuts where it's a tool-free process, because I don't like having to have a wrench out at the river. And that was the only bolt in this entire Highbanker. On this Highbanker, I've got bolts for the adjustability of the side. On this Highbanker, it's completely tool-free. So since I'm not holding this on a tripod, essentially you, look, I'll show you how easy it is with one hand. That just folds down. That folds down. There, your Highbanker is completely down. And if you want to bring it back up again, whoop, one hand, no tools. Well, there you go. You can lock it in at that height or that height or that height. And what's really cool about this is you can actually still, without any bolts or nuts or anything, you can just pick the thing up. It's about 35 pounds with all the carpets and matting and everything. A little heavy for, you know, my level of strength, but it's all there. And so there's no nuts, no bolts. The only thing you have those in is for the legs themselves. These are some of the nicest legs I've ever worked with on a Highbanker, and I think these are still totally fine. But this bolt, what I've done to replace it is, I should really have a tripod set up for this, but I'm just going to show you. This is set up through here, and it's off-centered where the axle goes through. So when you lift this up, it raises up like this, and then raises back down. And when it's in the down position, this is down, so gravity holds it down, so it's not going to go anywhere. So we just tip that up, at which point, how does this work? Right, this side slips up and out. And then to put it all back together, you simply take this, press it into that hole, and then it's over here, and you would simply spin this. Okay, not that simple. Have to actually put that into place. Come on. Show the nice people. Anyways, I would have to hold that with one hand. So, there. And then once it's locked in, straight down. Now, this is something that I'm going to be working on a little bit. So I want to make sure that this is, you know, good when, you know, you're shoveling gravel in here all day. There's no issues with this whole system here. Make sure that's got enough of a bite there, and that this is not problematic for me out in the field. But if that works, then even though it's a fair bit of effort just to do that little bit, in my opinion, it wouldn't be worth it if I had a bunch of bolts and nuts everywhere else in the Highbanker. But this was literally the last one on the entire machine. So if I can get rid of that entirely, one less thing to lose out there, and if for some reason that doesn't work, then we'll have to go with this, and I'll just make sure that I drill a hole somewhere to put a spare one of these mounted, so you always have a spare, because nothing worse than being out in the middle of nowhere and losing a bolt or a nut. But I think this is going to work. I'm excited to take this out to the river, and yeah, I'm going to get digging into this thing. So there you go. Roughly 8 inches wide here. I went up with 10 inches wide here, and instead of going from 8 inches to 12 inches, it's simply 10 inches all the way straight down. And in order to make sure that these trays still slide in and out really, really easily, the outside angle of the sluice is actually angled out like this. So you can probably see it better at this end here. Here it actually angles out and then comes back in. And the only reason I'm able to do that, to make sure that everything slides in and out really easily, is because I manufacture my own legs. This, I just put a shim down here, but in the production version, I'm obviously going to get this laser cut out to factor in for the exact angle of that. I did that so that I can make this fit inside of a 14-inch wide shipping box. It was about $100 difference to ship something that could fit inside a 14-inch wide box versus something that had to go to the next size up of box. I was considering not installing the legs and having you do that at your end, but I'd rather just everything ready to go and installed properly and straight and good. And yeah, it was about $100 difference when shipping to Europe to go to the next size of shipping box. So this thing is actually 39 inches long instead of 36 inches long. Just taking full advantage of the size shipping box that I'm working with to make sure that I can get this out to as many people in the world who are interested. I think it's going to work really, really well. That screen is going to be a massive improvement. Like I said, anyone down in the United States who wants to throw a 3-inch dredge into this thing, I'll have to build like an optional thing that'll hold your hose. And then, yeah, if you've got like a 3-inch combo setup and you want to try running it over this type of material with a, you know, screened material going over a 20-inch wide sluice box running the Poppin' Sun, I suspect your 3-inch dredge is going to get a nice little boost in its recovery of powder fine gold. See you out in the river. Cheers. That's plenty of suction. The screen's working nicer, isn't it?
It's the screen for sure. Yeah, it's like surface tension in the screen mostly. Like it doesn't look like it's coming off the top. Yeah, I've actually had some of those before. Surface tension is to the bottom of the screen.
But for a 3-inch dredge, it actually is working. That's pretty awesome. Actually, plenty of suction. It's still working. That's a serious amount of water.